Well, hello again. Welcome back to our third session on radio. We're going to talk about a little bit about the technology here and a little bit about some of the alternatives to the radio. So let me show you a real simple graphic here on how radio works. There's an antenna that collects the waves, the sound waves that are going through the air. And these waves can be, depending on the kind of radio you have, they could be digital, they could be analog. Originally, they were analog, and like I said, a lot of stations still use analog. So what happens is the antenna collects the waves and it goes through your tuner. Now, your tuner is simply the thing that you use on the dial to check. You want to listen to 970 AM or you want to listen to 1420 or whatever radio station you're going to listen to. They all have a number ahead of them, and that number is usually the frequency in which they're broadcasting on. So your tuner is simply going to find the frequency that you need to that this particular waves will come on. So then you have a detector on some radios. Some you don't do. If it's an AM radio, you don't have a detector, or if it's an FM radio, you don't have it because the detector determines is this an AM or FM broadcast. Then it will amplify the sound so you can actually hear it, and it sends this to a speaker. That's it. That's all you have to do. So creating a radio is not a very difficult task. Okay, now let's talk about these difference between the AM and the FM though. The AM, it stands for amplitude modulation, and it varies in signal strength. And if there is an electrical storm, like a storm, a snowstorm or a thunderstorm or whatever, it will interfere with the broadcast, and it'll mess up the signals, and you'll get snow or you'll get static, and you won't be able to listen to the station. FM radio varies the frequency of the signal. It doesn't broadcast as far. There's a smaller coverage area, but you have a higher quality sound. So amplitude modulation is for distance. How I want to reach a larger audience by just sending out a more powerful signal that will travel farther, as opposed to the frequency modulation FM, which is more concerned with the quality of the sound. This is why so many radio stations adopted frequency modulation if they're doing music. So in 1978, this is when FM passed AM in the number of listeners. So it's been a long time since FM has been the more popular, but AM is still around. On your radio, on your car, you can have, most cars have AM or FM, because there's still a lot of broadcasts in AM, because sometimes the sound isn't that important. If it's just talk radio, for example, you don't have to worry about getting all the sound, as opposed to music stations, which would be the ones that would tend to be went to FM initially. It used to be when I first started, I remember this when I first started, it was mostly classical music on FM. And somebody got the wise idea in the 70s, why don't we put rock and roll on here? And hey, guess what? It changed everything. So, okay. Now, we talked before about the Telecommunication Act of 1996. It lifted the ownership limits because before you could only own 7 stations. And then you could own 18. And in 1996, there was no limit, which really opened the doors. Look at this. Some of the owners, Clear Channel Communications would own 1,200 stations. They got rid of some of their stations. They only own about 1,000 now. Cumulus Media had 336 stations. So what you could do after the 1996 Telecommunication Act was radio. You could make radio a huge business enterprise. Before, owning 1 or 2 stations was not that lucrative, especially with radio, because you couldn't charge the advertising rate you could charge with TV. But anyway, the radio then developed these big companies like Clear Channel, Cumulus. They were business organizations. and they were not technology innovators. They knew nothing about the technology. They were just business people, and they could see a business opportunity, and they took hold of it and turned it into a very lucrative enterprise. Now, we do have some substitutes for radio. As I mentioned, a lot of you would listen to your iPhones or your iPod or whatever you have, that's your music player. You hook it up to your TV and the radio in your car. And you listen to it on your smartphone, which is what you would probably use to hook up to your radio in the car. You can use a digital media player or a tablet and listen to things. The research shows that about 80% of the people in the United States listen to audio on digital devices each week. So the huge majority of these substitutes are going to be, quite frankly, people listening to radio on the internet or listening to podcasts like, on a smartphone. But those will be the some of the substitutes. I want to turn your attention to the SDARS. That's a satellite radio. Okay, satellite digital audio radio service. Okay. There were originally two different companies, XM Satellite Radio and Sirius Satellite Radio. They are now one company, which is Sirius XM Radio. Originally, they were told they could, when they got their license, that weren't supposed to ever merge. Both of them were having trouble keeping customers happy. What would happen is, apparently, it costs them a lot to set you up to start your subscription to their service, and it is a subscription service. Okay, the music comes commercial free for the most part, but it's going to cost you. I have on here $15 to $20 a month. Sometimes it's a little more than that. It just depends on which service you're getting. But anyway, you pay for it on a monthly basis, just like you pay for cable TV. But this is music. And I'll admit that I only listen to satellite radio. That's the only kind of radio I listen to. The good news is you can travel all across the country, listen to one station. Problem for the companies was it costs a lot to set the subscribers up, so they don't like the idea that you'll subscribe and then drop the service and then subscribe again and drop the service. They don't like that at all. Like you can do with a lot of streaming services. You can do that. If you want to watch a certain series on Prime, you can just sign up for Prime for a certain period of time. The satellite radio station now, which is satellite. XM radio, they don't like for you to do that. So Sirius XM would prefer that you not do that, but you can still do it. So the way the satellite radio works here, and this is just another picture. You can see, say you take a pic of this car right here. What happens is you've got a radio, satellite radio, and there's an antenna on the top of your car. You'll see them, and a lot of times you'll notice if you'll see these antennas that will pick up the signal from the satellite. Okay, and it will, you can see that it can actually directly here on this one. You can see it just directly. If you have it in your home, for example, it goes right to your house. The satellite uploads the information. Okay, a ground satellite uploads the information to satellites that are basically circling the earth, and then you get access to them when you have a subscription. So again, the technology here is very simple, how it works. Now, question you might ask yourself is, how did this come to be in the first place? In other words, why would you even have satellite radio? And my suggestion as to why is the blunders of the broadcast commercial radio stations. Broadcast radio station owners have made SDARS, satellite radio, possible by what they play and how they program their stations. They have fewer formats. They play the same songs over and over again. On satellite radio, if you want to listen to Spanish music, you can, French music, Korean. You want to listen to rock and roll from the 70s or from the 90s, or you want to listen to country from the 80s, you can. They have all of these formats. And it makes it so you can listen to whatever you want to. And of course, they also have talk radio on there, and they have some of the rebroadcasts like stuff from Fox TV, newscasts, as well as NBC. So ESPN is also is on satellite radio. So anyway, the fewer formats that were being introduced by the broadcast had less mass appeal, and so now the individual stations of Sirius XM, they don't get as many listeners individually, but of course they combine all of their stations in terms of generating their revenue. So they make most of the money on a lot of the music channels through the subscriptions. They do have advertising on some of the channels. Like I said, if they have Fox or if they have MSNBC, they will rebroadcast those commercials. So anyway, the idea there is that the blunders made by broadcasts were just too limited in what they would do. And I would get so frustrated with listening to the same 10 songs all the time if you listen to some rock station. So. Okay, now I'm going to move over to digital audio broadcasting. We talked about digital broadcasting for TV, and so now we talk about it in terms of radio. HD radio is from a company called Ubiquity Digital, and that's the main company that provides it. The good news is there's no hiss on the it's like CD quality, actually. I mean, you can pause, you can fast forward, do all kinds of things like that if you have a radio that combines these things. And of course, they still give the weather and the traffic and all that kind of information. For the most part, we should not look at this as totally digital. We should think about it as a combination of analog and digital. For example, if you're listening to the radio and it comes on and tells you the name of the song, and on your radio, it'll tell you, oh, this is a song from 1980, and the name of the artist. That's digital. That's a digital reception. But a lot of times the music itself is analog. Not always. In fact, Sirius XM, everything they broadcast on the music channels they have, which are a lot of music channels, well over 100, they are. Like I said, they're broadcast in analog. Sorry about that. I lost my train of thought for a second. So anyway, wherever I was, I had an interruption here, so sorry about that. Okay, so anyway, it's not totally digital a lot of times, what I'm trying to say. A lot of times, in most days, it's going to be a combination of analog and digital. Okay, where do we listen to the radio? Well, we listen to it most of the time in our cars, 75%, unless you're between 18 and 24, where you listen to iPods, or you listen to your smartphone that has probably 2,000 or 3,000 songs on it that you can listen to. And over half of the people that in that age listen on their iPods or their smartphones. The smartphone took over the job of an iPod. So now I mentioned earlier about community radio, and these are like low power FM stations, LPFMs. They have a short range, and they usually are used for educational purposes. As a matter of fact, a lot of schools, colleges, high schools, then they have a radio station, will have a LPFM station. It's low power, it doesn't cost very much, and it's not going to it's very easy to set up. And again, I mentioned here that it's often used for educational purposes, also for nonprofit organizations will use it for they can have their own little radio station. The good news is you can have your own radio station and broadcast to the people that you want to broadcast to. The bad news is you don't have a very long range. You could be on campus, you could have one on Louisville campus, and by the time you get you start moving down 3rd Street, you'll be out of range in a very short time. but it's a very handy and a very, again, gives more people ways to communicate in a community situation. So what's ahead for us with radio? It's a good question. You can see I have there's smart speakers and smartphones, and MP3 players are all already in place, and they are pretty much taking over what the digital audio broadcast streaming. And I mentioned there radio stations as they have streaming MP3 audio to mobile phones, which is what typically happens. Okay, the lasting impact then of radio. It's helped shape societies, influenced culture, politics, public opinion. It's demonstrated remarkable adaptability, transitioning from traditional broadcast to digital formats while maintaining its core function of information dissemination. So it's still a vital tool for communication, proving its enduring relevance in the modern world, even though it's been around for over 100 years. So radio is still a very important medium and very important technology. Okay, that takes us to an end of our discussions on radio. And so I'll stop here.